I'd never seen Carter look small before. Not physically. That would have been impossible. He's 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of guy who fills a doorway without trying. Even at 24, he carried himself like someone who had already survived more than most people twice his age. Confident, controlled, untouchable. That's why the night I saw him break is burned into my memory like a scar. It started with a stupid text. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed on the counter. "Can you come over?" No explanation. No emoji. Just that. Carter wasn't the "can you come over" type. He was the "I'm good" type. The "don't worry about me" type. The guy who showed up for everyone else but never let anyone show up for him. I stared at the message longer than I'd like to admit. Then another one came through. "Please." That was all it took. I didn't even finish eating. I grabbed my hoodie and keys and headed out. Carter's apartment was only 10 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. My mind kept running through possibilities. Did he get into a fight? Did something happen at work? Was he sick? Hurt? Or worse, was he finally done with me? We'd been something. Not officially. Not defined. We'd been dancing around it for months. Late-night conversations. Lingering touches. That charged silence that stretches just a second too long. We were both over 21. Old enough to know what we were doing. Old enough to know when feelings were getting real. And they were. I pulled into his parking lot and noticed his lights were on. That was something, at least. I knocked once before trying the handle. Unlocked. That alone made my stomach twist. "Carter," I called as I stepped inside. No answer. The place was quiet. Too quiet. No TV. No music. Just the low hum of the fridge and the distant sound of traffic outside. I found him in the living room. He was sitting on the floor. Not on the couch. Not at the table. On the floor, back against the couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring at nothing. For a second, I just stood there. Because this wasn't Carter. This wasn't the guy who walked into a room and owned it. This wasn't the guy who teased me for overthinking everything. This wasn't the guy who smirked like he had the world figured out. This was someone else. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. His jaw was tight. His eyes were red. Red. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I stepped closer. "Hey." He didn't look up right away. When he did, it felt like something cracked open in my chest. I've seen Carter angry. I've seen him amused. I've seen him confident. I've seen him frustrated. I had never seen him scared. "Evan," he said quietly. No sarcasm. No teasing. Just my name. I sat down in front of him without thinking, close enough that our knees almost touched. "What happened?" He swallowed. I watched his throat move. His hands flexed like he was trying to decide whether to talk or shut down completely. "My dad called." That was enough to explain everything. Carter didn't talk about his family much. What little I knew was pieced together from late-night fragments. Strict father, constant pressure, the kind of household where vulnerability was treated like weakness. "What did he say?" I asked carefully. Carter laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was sharp and hollow. "He found out." The words hung there. Found out. My pulse quickened. Found out about us. Carter's eyes flicked up to mine. And there it was again, that flicker of fear. "He saw a picture," Carter said. "My cousin posted something from last weekend. You had your arm around me." I remembered the picture instantly. We were at a friend's birthday party. I'd pulled him close without thinking. He'd let me. We'd both been smiling. It hadn't felt dangerous. Until now. "What did he say?" I repeated, softer this time. Carter's jaw tightened. "The usual." That told me enough. I felt heat rise in my chest. Anger. Not at Carter. Never at him. At anyone who could make him look like this. "He doesn't get to." "I know," Carter cut in. His voice cracked slightly, and that hit harder than anything else. "I know he doesn't get to. I'm 24. I live on my own. I pay my own bills." He looked down at his hands. "But it still gets to me." And that was it. That was the moment. The moment I saw the armor slip. Carter had always been my steady one. The calm voice. The grounded presence. When I spiraled, he pulled me back. Now he looked like he was barely holding himself together. I moved closer without thinking, closing the small gap between us. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said. His eyes met mine again, searching. "I'm not pretending," he said automatically. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Carter." Something shifted in his expression, like he was exhausted from holding it in. "He said I'm embarrassing the family," Carter muttered. "That I'm confused. That I'm throwing my life away." My chest tightened. That I'm not the son he raised. There it was. The real wound. Silence filled the space between us, heavy and suffocating. Carter had always acted like he didn't care what anyone thought. But this was different. This was the voice that shaped him growing up. The expectations. The pressure. I reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't. My hand covered his. His skin was warm, but his fingers were cold. "You're not embarrassing," I said firmly. "You're not confused. And you're definitely not throwing your life away." He let out a shaky breath. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I admitted. "But you don't have to go through it alone." That's when it happened. The shift. Carter's shoulders dropped, just slightly. And then, almost like he couldn't stop it, his forehead tipped forward until it rested against mine. We'd been close before. Close enough to feel each other breathe. Close enough to blur the line between friendship and something more. But this was different. This wasn't tension. This was trust. "I hate that it still affects me," he whispered. His voice wasn't strong anymore. It was raw. And for the first time since I'd met him, Carter didn't look invincible. He looked human. And somehow, that made me love him more than anything else ever had. I lifted my free hand and rested it gently against the side of his neck. Not possessive, not urgent, just steady. "You're allowed to be hurt," I said quietly. "You're allowed to not be okay." His breathing faltered. And then, barely noticeable, I felt him lean into my touch. That tiny movement shattered something inside me. Because Carter never leaned on anyone. But he was leaning on me. And I wasn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not after seeing him like this. Not after realizing that the strongest guy I knew could still break, and that he trusted me enough to let me see it. I thought I understood what we were before. I didn't. Seeing him vulnerable changed everything. And I had no idea just how much that night was going to test both of us. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Foreheads touching. My hand at his neck. His fingers still tangled with mine like he was anchoring himself. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big declarations. No sudden confessions. Just breathing. Slow. Uneven. Real. Eventually, Carter pulled back slightly, but not far. His hand slid up from his knees and rested on my thighs like he needed to make sure I was still there. "I didn't tell him about you," he said quietly. That caught me off guard. "Okay." He assumed. Carter continued. "He always does. But I didn't give him details." I studied his face. There was guilt there. "You don't owe him details," I said. "That's not what I mean." His jaw tightened again. "I mean, I didn't defend you." The air shifted. That one hurt a little. Not because I needed a confrontation with his dad, but because I suddenly understood the weight Carter had been carrying alone. He was yelling, Carter went on, saying I've changed, that I'm acting different lately, that whoever I'm spending time with is messing with my head. A faint, humorless smile flickered across his face. "I guess that's you." I snorted softly. Wow. I always wanted to be someone's corrupting influence. Carter's lips twitched. Just a little. And that tiny hint of amusement felt like progress. But then his expression fell again. "I didn't defend you," he repeated, softer this time. Something clicked. This wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about arguments. It was about fear. Fear that choosing me meant losing everything else. I shifted closer until our knees pressed fully together. "You don't have to fight every battle at once," I said. "Especially not when you're still figuring things out yourself." His eyes searched mine carefully. "You think I'm still figuring it out?" There it was. The question under all of it. I swallowed. "I think you're allowed to take your time," I said carefully. "About us. About coming out. About what any of this means." The word us hung between us. Carter's gaze dropped to my mouth for half a second, then back to my eyes. "You make it sound simple," he murmured. "It's not simple," I admitted. "It's just real." He inhaled sharply through his nose. "Evan, I don't want to hide you." My heart stuttered. But I also don't know how to flip a switch and suddenly not care about what my dad thinks. I nodded slowly. That was honest. Painfully honest. "I'm not asking you to flip a switch," I said. "I just don't want to feel like I'm something you're ashamed of." His reaction was immediate. "I'm not ashamed of you." His voice was firm now. Defensive. "Then what are you afraid of?" I asked quietly. Silence. Carter leaned back slightly, running both hands through his hair. "I'm afraid," he said finally, "that if I choose this, if I choose you, I lose him for good." There it was. The real fear. I let that sink in before answering. "And if you don't choose this?" I asked gently. He looked at me again. That question hit. Because we both knew the answer. If he didn't choose this, if he kept me at arm's length to keep the peace, eventually, I'd walk away. not out of anger, but self-preservation. His throat worked as he swallowed. "You'd leave," he said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was realization. "I don't want to," I said honestly. "But I can't be someone you only reach for when it's convenient." The words weren't harsh. They were steady, and I could see him absorbing them. The tension between us shifted from fear to something heavier: decision. Carter had always been decisive in every other area of his life: career, fitness, goals. But this was personal, and personal was harder. He leaned forward again, closer this time. "So what are we, Evan?" he asked. His voice wasn't teasing. It was vulnerable. I didn't rush to answer, because I wanted to get it right. "We're two grown men," I said slowly, "who clearly care about each other more than we pretend to." His lips parted slightly. "We're not a phase. We're not confusion. And we're definitely not a mistake." The last word was deliberate. Carter's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. "And I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family," I added. "I'm asking you to choose yourself." That landed hard, because Carter had spent his whole life choosing what was expected, choosing what was approved, choosing what was safe. I watched the conflict flicker behind his eyes. Then something shifted again. His hand slid from my thigh to my waist. Slow, intentional. "I don't feel confused when I'm with you," he said. His thumb brushed lightly against my side through my hoodie. "I don't feel embarrassed." He leaned in closer. "I feel calm." That almost undid me, because Carter was not calm right now, but he was trying. "For the first time," he added quietly, "I don't feel like I'm performing." That hit deeper than anything else he'd said. He wasn't just afraid of losing his dad. He was afraid of losing the version of himself he'd built to survive. And with me, that version wasn't necessary. I cupped his jaw gently, guiding his face toward mine. "You don't have to perform here," I whispered. His eyes softened. And then, finally, he kissed me. Not rushed, not desperate. Slow, careful, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he moved too fast. His lips were warm, slightly trembling at first. I felt the tension in him, the hesitation, and I stayed steady, letting him lead, letting him decide. After a few seconds, the tremble faded. His hand tightened slightly at my waist. The kiss deepened, not aggressively, just certain. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine again. "I don't want to lose you," he admitted. My chest ached in the best possible way. "Then don't," I said. He huffed out a quiet, almost breathless laugh. "You make everything sound so straightforward." Because sometimes it is. Another silence settled between us. But this one felt different. Less heavy, more intentional. Carter leaned back against the couch, tugging me gently with him, so I ended up half between his legs, half leaning against his chest. It was instinctive, protective. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. Still fast, but steadier than before. "Stay tonight," he murmured. Not commanding, not casual, asking. I tilted my head slightly to look at him. "Yeah." His hand traced absent patterns against my side. "I don't want to be alone with my thoughts right now." There it was again. The vulnerability, the honesty, and I realized something in that moment. Carter wasn't just asking me to stay the night. He was asking me to stay through the hard parts, through the fallout, through the fear, and I had no idea what that would cost either of us. But I also knew one thing for certain. Seeing him vulnerable didn't make me question us. It made me all in. "Okay," I said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. But neither of us knew yet that this was just the beginning of the real storm. And the next call from his father wouldn't be a phone call. It would be face to face. I should have known it wouldn't stay quiet for long. The night I stayed over, Carter barely slept. He didn't say much after we moved to his bedroom. He just pulled me close like I was something solid in a room that felt like it was tilting. I could feel it in the way he held me, tighter than usual. Not possessive, just steadying himself. At some point, around 3 in the morning, I woke up because his breathing had changed. He wasn't asleep. "You good?" I whispered into the dark. A pause. "Yeah." He wasn't. But I didn't push. I just brushed my thumb slowly over his side, small circles, grounding. Eventually, his body relaxed enough that we both drifted off. The next day felt deceptively normal. We made coffee, sat at the kitchen counter, avoided the conversation that hovered over us like a storm cloud. By noon, Carter's phone buzzed again. He didn't even have to look at it for his shoulders to tense. "Is it him?" I asked quietly. He nodded once. Then he did something I didn't expect. He answered, "Yeah." I watched his face carefully. Silence on his end. Then, no, I'm not coming over. A beat. I said no. His jaw tightened. You don't get to demand that. My chest tightened. Demand. Another pause, longer this time. Carter's free hand clenched into a fist on the counter. You want to talk? Fine. But you don't get to talk to me like that. His voice wasn't yelling. It was controlled. And somehow that was more powerful. He listened again, and I saw it. The flicker. The old reflex. The part of him that had been trained to comply. Then his eyes lifted. They met mine. And something changed. I'm not confused, he said firmly into the phone. And I'm not embarrassed. His gaze didn't leave mine. I'm seeing someone. My heart slammed against my ribs. Silence on the other end. Heavy silence. Then Carter's expression darkened. You don't have to like it, he said. But you don't get to insult him. Him. He said it clearly. Deliberately. My throat tightened. Another long pause. Then, quietly. If you want to talk, you can come here. My stomach dropped. He hung up before I could react. He's coming? I asked. Carter nodded once. Yeah. When? He checked the time. Now. That word hit like a punch. Now. I stood up instinctively. You want me to leave? The question tasted bitter. Carter's head snapped up immediately. No. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't unsure. No, he repeated. Standing too. If he's going to say anything, he says it in front of you. That was new. That was bold. That was terrifying. You sure? I asked quietly. His eyes softened for half a second, then steadied again. I'm done pretending you don't exist. My pulse raced. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. But it felt like it shook the entire apartment. Carter walked toward it without looking back. I stayed where I was, near the living room, visible, but not in the way. The door opened, and there he was. Mr. Hayes, mid-50s, tall like Carter, but sharper somehow, tighter. The kind of man who carried authority like it was stitched into his bones. His eyes landed on Carter first, then slowly shifted past him. To me, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. So it's true, his father said. No greeting, no introduction, just accusation. Carter didn't step aside to let him in. He stood firm in the doorway. It's not a crime, Carter replied evenly. His father's gaze moved back to him. It's not who you are. I think I know who I am. The air between them crackled. You're acting out, his father said. This is rebellion. You've always been stubborn. Carter's hands clenched at his sides. I'm 24, he said. I pay my own rent. I work full-time. I'm not rebelling. I'm living. And throwing everything away for. His father's eyes flicked to me again. For this. The word wasn't neutral. It wasn't kind. It was dismissive. Like I was an object. Like I wasn't standing right there. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't my fight. It was Carter's. And Carter surprised me. He has a name, Carter said sharply. That made his father blink. You will not disrespect him in my apartment. That sentence hung in the air. Because that was new. That wasn't the obedient son. That wasn't the boy who swallowed his feelings. That was a man drawing a line. His father's jaw tightened. You're choosing this lifestyle over your family? The word lifestyle landed like a slap. Carter didn't hesitate. I'm choosing honesty. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. You raised me to be strong, Carter continued, voice steady despite the tremor underneath. To stand by what I believe in. His father scoffed. This isn't strength. Carter's voice lowered. It takes more strength than you think. I saw it then. The fear. Still there. Still clawing at him. But he wasn't backing down. His father's expression shifted from anger to something colder. If you walk down this path, he said slowly, don't expect my support. There it was. The threat. The ultimatum. I felt my chest tighten. Because this was the moment. The split in the road. Carter's breathing grew shallow. I could see the weight of it pressing down on him. Years of approval. Years of expectation. All on the line. And then, Carter did something that made my throat burn. He stepped back. Not away, but closer to me. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. It was quiet. Intentional. I'm not asking for your approval, Carter said. I'm asking for respect. His father's gaze dropped to where we stood, side by side, and something hardened in his expression. You're making a mistake, he said flatly. Maybe, Carter replied, but it's mine to make. The silence that followed felt like it could swallow the entire room. His father looked at him for a long time, like he was trying to recognize the man standing in front of him. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The door closed, and the apartment was suddenly too quiet. Carter didn't move. I could see it in his posture, the adrenaline wearing off, the tremor coming back. I stepped closer. "You okay?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Then his voice came out barely above a whisper. "I think I just lost him." The strength from earlier was gone. This wasn't the confident stand-your-ground Carter. This was the same guy I found on the floor last night. Raw, scared, human. I turned him toward me, hands resting on his arms. "You didn't lose him," I said gently. "You gave him a chance." Carter's eyes were glossy again. What if he never calls? The vulnerability in that question hit harder than anything else. I pulled him into me without asking. He didn't resist. He folded into my chest like he'd been waiting for permission. "You didn't choose me over your family," I murmured into his hair. "You chose yourself." His grip tightened around me, and I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about Carter finally letting himself be seen. Fully. No armor. No performance. And even though the storm had just passed through, I had a feeling the real aftermath was only beginning. After his dad left, Carter didn't let go of me for a long time. At first, I thought it was just adrenaline. The crash after standing your ground. But even when his breathing evened out, even when the apartment settled back into its normal quiet, he stayed close. Like if he stepped away, something would collapse. "I didn't think it would actually feel like this," he said eventually, voice muffled against my shoulder. "Like what?" "Like a breakup." That made my chest ache. Because that's exactly what it was. Not romantic, not dramatic, but a separation from the version of his father he'd been trying to hold on to. The one who might accept him eventually if he just said the right things. "You didn't slam the door," I reminded him. He did. Carter pulled back slightly, running a hand down his face. "I meant what I said," he added. "About not hiding you." I studied him carefully. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment boldness. The fire from confrontation had faded. What was left was steadier, quieter. "Okay," I said softly. That made him look at me. "Okay," he repeated. "I'm not going to make you prove it," I said. "You just proved it." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes again. "I don't want you thinking I'm going to panic and disappear tomorrow." "I don't," I said honestly. "Because I didn't. Yesterday, maybe I would have. But not after today." Carter walked to the window and stared outside for a moment. His shoulders weren't tense anymore, just heavy. "I spent so much time trying to be what he expected," he said quietly. "Sports, business degree, dating girls I didn't even like that much." I stayed quiet. "When I started feeling things for you," he continued, "I told myself it was temporary." I didn't flinch. That one didn't hurt. It made sense. I thought if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. He turned toward me. It didn't. There was no shame in his expression, just truth. "When did you stop pretending?" I asked. Carter let out a breath. "The night you stayed over after your anxiety spiral. That caught me off guard. You were shaking," he said, "trying to act like you were fine. You hate looking weak." I huffed lightly. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything about you." That landed deeper than he probably intended. "You fell asleep on my chest," he went on. And I remember thinking, this doesn't feel wrong. It feels like home. My throat tightened. "I tried to push it down after that," he admitted. "But every time you laughed, every time you touched my arm without thinking, it just got harder." I stepped closer. "You could have walked away," I said quietly. "I know. But you didn't." Carter's jaw softened. "No." Silence stretched between us again. But this one felt different. Less fragile. More settled. Then his phone buzzed again. We both looked at it. Different name this time. His sister. He picked it up slowly. "Hey." I watched his face shift as he listened. Then, he came over. Pause. "No, I'm fine." Another pause. Carter glanced at me. "He's not what you think," he said into the phone. That caught me. Not defensive. Not aggressive. Protective. I tried not to overanalyze it. "He makes me happy," Carter said quietly. The words were simple, but hearing them out loud, like that, made something warm bloom in my chest. He listened again, then nodded slightly. "Okay, thanks." He hung up. "Well?" I asked. Carter exhaled slowly. "She said Dad's pissed. But she also said he's just scared." I frowned. "Scared of what?" "That I won't need him anymore." That hit in a different way, because that wasn't hatred. That was fear. Carter rubbed the back of his neck. "She said to give him time." Do you want to? He hesitated. Yeah. That surprised me. I nodded. Then we give him time. Carter stepped closer again. You're not mad. For what? For not cutting him off completely. For still wanting him in my life. I shook my head. I don't want to replace your family, Carter. His shoulders dropped at that. I just want to stand next to you. That did something to him. I saw it. The tension that had been sitting in his spine all day finally eased. He reached for me again, slower this time. Intentional. You are, he said. Not dramatic. Not intense. Just certain. I rested my hands on his waist. And I'm not going anywhere, I replied. His forehead touched mine again, softer than before. Less desperate. More steady. You saw me at my worst, he murmured. I smiled slightly. That wasn't your worst. It felt like it. I've seen you cold, I said. I've seen you shut down. That's worse. His brow furrowed. You weren't cold today, I continued. You were honest. That seemed to settle into him slowly. I hate crying in front of people, he admitted. You didn't cry. I almost did. Still counts. A quiet laugh escaped him. Then he grew serious again. I don't want to be the guy who only feels strong when everything's easy. You're not. He searched my face like he was trying to see if I meant it. I don't want you carrying me all the time either, he added. You don't weigh that much, I teased lightly. He rolled his eyes, but his grip on me tightened. I mean it, Evan. I know, I said. And I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be real. He nodded slowly. That I can do. For the first time since yesterday, I felt something like peace settle between us. Not because everything was fixed. Not because his dad suddenly understood. But because the truth was out. And Carter didn't hide from it. He didn't hide from me. Later that night, when we lay in bed again, his hand rested loosely on my chest. Not gripping. Not holding on for survival. Just there. Present. You know what scares me most? He said into the quiet. What? That if he doesn't come around, I might start resenting him. That's human, I replied. Yeah, but I don't want to lose him completely. You won't, I said. You don't know that. No, I admitted. But I know this, you didn't burn the bridge. You just stopped pretending it wasn't cracked. He was quiet after that. Then his thumb brushed slowly over my collarbone. I've never let anyone see me like that, he whispered. I turned my head slightly to look at him in the dark. I'm glad it was you. And that, more than the confrontation, more than the kiss, more than the stand he took. That was the moment I realized something irreversible had happened. We weren't just navigating feelings anymore. We were building something. And seeing him vulnerable didn't make me question his strength. It showed me the depth of it. But just when things started to feel steady, life decided to test us again. Because vulnerability isn't a one-time thing. And the next crack wouldn't come from his family. It would come from us. For a few days, things felt lighter. Not perfect. Not magically healed. But lighter. Carter went back to work. I went back to mine. We texted like usual, stupid memes. Did you eat? You alive? The kind of small check-ins that start meaning more than they look. His dad didn't call. That silence hung in the background, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was just there. Friday night, Carter invited me over again. This time it wasn't because he was falling apart. It was because he wanted me there. That difference mattered. We ordered takeout, half-watched some show neither of us cared about, ended up talking instead. His arm was stretched along the back of the couch, fingers lazily tracing patterns on my shoulder. It felt normal. Good normal. The kind that sneaks up on you. At some point, I said something stupid about how dramatic the whole week had been. Guess we survived your first official coming-out confrontation, I joked lightly. Carter didn't laugh. I noticed immediately. What? I asked. He shifted slightly, pulling his hand away. That's not what that was, he said. I blinked. What do you mean? It wasn't me coming out, he replied. It was me telling my dad about you. There was a difference in his tone. Subtle, but sharp. I didn't mean. I know, he cut in quickly. I'm not ready for it to be some big announcement. The air shifted. Not hostile, but tense. I'm not asking you to make it one, I said carefully. Carter rubbed his hands together like he was trying to organize his thoughts. I feel like everything's moving fast. That caught me off guard. Fast. I repeated. Yeah. He stood up, pacing a little. My dad shows up. I draw a line. Suddenly it feels like my entire life is shifting in a week. I watched him carefully. This wasn't about regret. It was about overwhelm. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. He stopped pacing immediately. No. That came fast. Firm. I don't regret you. My chest loosened slightly. Then what's the problem? Carter ran a hand through his hair. I don't want this to be about proving something, he said. Not to my dad. Not to anyone. It's not, I replied. But it felt like it that day, he admitted. Like I had to pick a side. Like if I didn't stand next to you, I was weak. That hit deeper than I expected. You think I pressured you? I asked. His head snapped toward me. No, that's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? He exhaled sharply. I'm saying I don't want to build us out of defiance. The words settled between us. Heavy, honest, and uncomfortable. Because there was truth there. The confrontation had accelerated something. Forced clarity. But clarity under pressure can feel different than clarity in calm. I stood up too, closing some of the distance. Okay, I said slowly. Then let's slow down. Carter's eyes searched mine. I don't want to lose what we have, he said. You're not going to. But I also don't want to feel like if I stumble, I'm letting you down. That was it. That was the crack. He wasn't doubting us. He was afraid of not being strong enough to carry it. You're allowed to stumble, I said softly. He shook his head. Not if it hurts you. I stepped closer until we were almost chest to chest. You don't get to decide what hurts me without asking, I said gently. That made him pause. You're not responsible for managing my emotions, Carter. I know that logically, he muttered. But emotionally? He didn't answer. Because emotionally, he'd spent his whole life managing other people's expectations. I reached up and rested my hands on his shoulders. We didn't start because you were rebelling, I said. We started because you couldn't stop looking at me like I was the only person in the room. His mouth twitched slightly despite himself. And because you kissed me like you'd been thinking about it for months, I added. That actually pulled a small laugh from him. Shut up. You know it's true. His hands slid to my waist automatically. Instinct. Comfort. Not performance. Maybe I just don't know how to do this without it being dramatic, he admitted. Then we learn, I said. He studied me carefully. You're not scared? Of what? That this is too much. I thought about it honestly. I'm scared of you shutting down, I said. I'm scared of you deciding it's easier to go back to safe. He flinched slightly at that. But I'm not scared of us, I finished. That seemed to land. He leaned his forehead against mine again. This time not from desperation, not from fear. From grounding. I don't want safe, he said quietly. Good. But I also don't want to wake up one day and realize I rushed something that matters. I nodded slowly. Then we don't rush. Silence. Steady this time. Not fragile. He brushed his thumb along my jaw. You're really not going anywhere. Not unless you push me away. He held my gaze. I won't. And I believed him. But relationships aren't tested only by outside pressure. They're tested in the quiet moments too. In miscommunication. In fear that doesn't have a villain attached to it. That night, when we lay in bed, Carter was thoughtful. Not distant. Just processing. I think I've spent my whole life reacting, he murmured into the dark. To what? To expectations. To pressure. To conflict. His fingers traced slow lines across my chest. I don't want us to be a reaction. I turned slightly toward him. We're not. How do you know? Because even when it's quiet, I said, you still reach for me. He didn't respond, but his arm tightened slightly around me, and I realized something important. The next challenge wouldn't be about his father. It would be about patience, about building something that wasn't fueled by crisis. And that can be harder than standing up in a fight, because fights give you adrenaline. Peace requires intention. The real question wasn't whether Carter could be brave under pressure. It was whether he could stay steady when things weren't dramatic anymore. And neither of us knew yet that the next test would come from a place neither of us expected. Not family, not fear, but jealousy. Jealousy isn't loud at first. It's subtle. A glance that lingers too long. A laugh that sounds a little different. A name mentioned casually, too casually. It started on a Wednesday. Carter had invited me to a work thing. Nothing fancy. Just drinks with his team after closing a project. I'd met a couple of his co-workers before. It wasn't a big deal. At least, that's what I told myself. The bar was crowded but not chaotic. Dim lights. Music low enough to talk over. Carter had one hand resting lightly on my lower back when we walked in, not claiming, just comfortable. That meant something. He introduced me as Evan. Not my friend. Not vague. Just my name. And for the first hour, everything felt easy. Until she showed up. Lena. Tall. Confident. The kind of woman who doesn't hesitate when she walks into a room. She hugged Carter without asking. Full arms around his neck. And he didn't pull away. Not immediately. I told myself I was overthinking it. They used to date. Someone mentioned casually beside me. Used to. The word echoed. My stomach tightened. Lena slid into the empty stool next to Carter like it had been reserved for her. She leaned in close when she talked, touched his arm when she laughed. He wasn't flirting back, but he wasn't exactly pulling away either. And suddenly, I felt outside. I hated that feeling. It was stupid. Carter had chosen me. He'd stood next to me in front of his father. And yet, watching his ex laugh at something he said made something sharp twist in my chest. I excused myself to grab another drink, mostly to breathe. You okay? His voice came from behind me. I didn't turn right away. Yeah, I said automatically. Lie. Carter stepped closer. Don't do that. Do what? Shut down. That almost made me laugh. You're imagining it. He stepped in front of me now, forcing eye contact. I know your face. I hesitated, because part of me didn't want to say it out loud. It sounded insecure. Small. But if we were doing honest, we had to actually do honest. You two seem comfortable, I said finally. Carter blinked once. With Lena? I nodded. His expression shifted. Not defensive. Realizing. Oh, that tiny word made my chest tighten more. Oh, Evan, he said carefully. We dated 2 years ago. I know. It ended because I wasn't into it. I swallowed. She seems like she still might be. Carter's jaw tightened slightly. She's not. You don't know that. I do. Something in his tone made me pause. How? Because she told me, he said. Last month. That hit like a splash of cold water. Last month. He nodded once. She asked if I wanted to try again. And I told her no. My pulse pounded in my ears. Why didn't you tell me that? He hesitated. And that hesitation hurt more than the answer. Because we weren't defined yet, he said. That stung. So you kept that to yourself? It didn't matter, he insisted. I said no. But it matters to me. That came out sharper than I intended. Carter exhaled slowly. I wasn't hiding it to be shady, he said. I just didn't think it was relevant. Your ex asking to get back together isn't relevant? The words were out before I softened them. He ran a hand over his face. Okay, that's fair. Silence stretched between us. The noise of the bar faded into background static. I don't want to feel stupid, I admitted quietly. Carter's eyes softened instantly. You're not. I don't want to be the guy who's blindsided because he assumed everything was fine. You're not that guy. Then help me not feel like one. That landed. He stepped closer. Closer than necessary in a crowded bar. You're not in competition with her, he said firmly. It doesn't feel that way. Then that's on me, he admitted. That surprised me. I should have told you, he continued. Not because she matters, but because you do. The tension in my chest eased, just slightly. I don't like seeing her that close to you, I said honestly. Then I'll create distance. Not for me, I replied quickly. For you, if that's what you want. He studied me carefully. I don't want her, he said plainly. There was no hesitation in that. None. I believed him. But jealousy isn't always logical. She knows about me? I asked. Carter nodded. I told her. That shifted something inside me. You told her? Yeah. How? He gave a faint, almost amused exhale. She asked if there was someone else. And I said yes. My heart beat harder. And when she asked who, I said someone who makes me feel more like myself than I've ever felt. My throat tightened. You said that? Yeah. I swallowed. You didn't tell me that either. He gave me a look. You want a transcript of every conversation? I almost smiled. Almost. I just don't want to feel like I'm catching up to your life, I said. You're not catching up, he replied. You're in it. That line landed deeper than he probably realized. We stood there for a second longer. Then I asked the real question. If she asked you again tomorrow, would you hesitate? His answer came without pause. No. Not defensive. Not emotional. Certain. And that certainty did more than any reassurance speech could have. I nodded slowly. Okay. Carter stepped even closer. You're the one I want to be building something with, he said quietly. The words weren't flashy, but they were intentional. Then don't make me feel like I'm standing outside of it, I replied. He held my gaze. I won't. And just like that, we crossed another line. Not dramatic, not explosive, but important, because jealousy didn't break us. It forced us to say things we might have avoided. When we walked back to the group, Carter didn't sit next to Lena. He sat next to me. Not pointedly, not performatively, naturally. His hand rested on my thigh under the table. Steady, grounded. And for the first time that night, I felt like I wasn't competing. I was chosen. But relationships aren't tested only by exes. And later that night, when Lena pulled Carter aside for one last conversation, I realized trust isn't just about what someone says in front of you. It's about what they do when you're not looking. And I wasn't sure yet if I was ready for what I might see next. I told myself I wasn't going to spiral, that I trusted him, that this wasn't high school. But when Lena touched Carter's arm and said, "Can we talk?" Just a minute, something instinctive tightened in my chest. Carter looked at me first. Not at her. At me. "You good?" he asked quietly. That mattered. "Yeah," I said. And this time, it wasn't a lie. He nodded once and followed her toward the quieter end of the bar. I didn't strain to hear them. I didn't hover. But I did watch. Not obsessively. Just enough. They stood facing each other. She said something animated, hands moving. He stayed still. Calm. Listening. At one point, she stepped closer. Too close. My jaw tightened. But then I saw it. Carter stepped back. Subtle, but deliberate. He folded his arms across his chest, not defensive, just closed, creating space. She reached out again. Maybe instinct, maybe habit, and he gently caught her wrist before it landed on him. Not aggressive, just firm. He said something I couldn't hear. Her expression shifted. Not angry, more disappointed. She glanced over at me, then back at him. Another exchange. Short, final. And then, Carter turned and walked back to me. Not slowly, not hesitantly, directly. He slid into the seat beside me, his thigh pressing against mine. "All good?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah." He didn't elaborate right away, just reached for his drink. I waited, because if we were doing trust, that meant not interrogating. After a second, he exhaled. She wanted closure. I raised an eyebrow slightly, and I told her I don't owe her closure. That caught me. "You said that?" "Yeah." His fingers brushed lightly against my knee under the table. I told her I'm with someone. Something warm settled in my chest. She asked if it was serious. I held his gaze. "And what did you say?" "I said I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't." That did it. That was the moment the last bit of tension dissolved. Not because he said the perfect thing, but because he didn't hesitate. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. "I know." "Then why did you?" He didn't look away. "Because I'm not half in." Simple. Clear. And so very Carter. I leaned slightly into him. Not dramatic. Just present. "I didn't doubt you," I admitted. But I needed to see it." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." There was no ego in his response. No wounded pride. Just understanding. The rest of the night passed easily. Lena kept her distance. Carter kept his hand somewhere on me. Thigh, back, fingers loosely hooked through mine when we stepped outside for air. Not to prove anything. Just because that's where it naturally fell. Later, when we left the bar and the cool night air hit us, Carter walked slightly ahead to open my car door. I smirked. "You're being suspiciously gentlemanly." He rolled his eyes. "Shut up." But he smiled. When we got back to his apartment, the energy shifted. Not tense. Not heavy. Just charged. He dropped his keys on the counter and turned to me. "You were quiet earlier," he said. "Was I?" "Yeah." "Thinking. About." I stepped closer. "About how different this feels." He tilted his head slightly. "Different how?" "You could have hidden that conversation." "I didn't want to." "You could have let her think there was still a chance." He shook his head. "There isn't." The way he said it left no room for interpretation. "And you didn't look back when you walked away?" I added. His lips curved slightly. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything about you." That made something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. He stepped closer until there was barely space between us. "You trust me?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Even when you're not in the room?" I held his gaze. "Yes." That wasn't blind trust. It was chosen trust. There's a difference. His hand slid to my waist. Slow. Grounded. "I don't want to be the guy who makes you question that." "Then don't be." He huffed softly at that. "You really don't make things complicated, do you?" "Oh, I absolutely do," I said. "Just not this." His forehead brushed mine. "You seeing me vulnerable last week," he murmured. "It scared me." "Why?" "Because I don't like needing anyone. And tonight I realized I don't mind choosing someone." That hit differently. Needing feels weak. Choosing feels powerful. He wasn't clinging. He wasn't reacting. He was choosing. "You're not choosing me because of your dad," I said quietly. "No." "Or because of Lena?" "No." "Then why?" His thumb traced slowly along my side. Because when things get loud, you're the one I want next to me. That answer settled into me slowly. Deep. This wasn't adrenaline. This wasn't crisis. This was calm clarity. And for the first time since everything exploded with his father, I didn't feel like we were reacting to something. We were building. Intentional. Slow. Real. I rested my hands against his chest. You know what I realized tonight? I said. What? I don't want to win you. He frowned slightly. You already have me. I don't want to compete, I clarified. I want to stand beside you. He softened. You do. And then he kissed me. Not urgent. Not proving. Just certain. And that certainty felt better than any dramatic declaration ever could. When we pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine again, a habit now. You know, he said quietly, my dad texted me earlier. My stomach tightened slightly. And he said we'll talk next week. That was something. Not an apology. Not acceptance. But not silence either. How do you feel about that? I asked. Carter thought for a moment. Not scared. That was growth. Good, I said. He smiled faintly. Seeing me vulnerable didn't scare you away. No. Why? I looked at him honestly. Because strength isn't never breaking, I said. It's letting someone see the cracks. He went quiet at that, then softer than I'd ever heard him say anything. Thank you for staying. I didn't answer with words. I just kissed him again. Because sometimes, staying doesn't need explanation. It just needs consistency. And as I stood there in his apartment, not hiding, not competing, not reacting, I realized something I hadn't admitted out loud yet. The first time I saw Carter vulnerable was the first time I knew this wasn't temporary. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't rebellion. It was real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what that meant.